In this screencast, I'm going to show you how to set up a Ruby on Rails application to send email with ActionMailer and Gmail. Gmail uses the TLS protocol for secure connections. Ruby didn't support TLS natively until version 1.8.7, and Rails didn't have built-in support for it until version 2.2.1. So if you're using earlier versions of either Ruby or Rails, you'll need to install a plugin. There are several plugins available for this, and here's one example, ActionMailer Optional TLS by Collective Idea. If you want to see some others, just search for ActionMailer TLS on GitHub. So to start us off, I've created a new Rails project called Gmailer. The first thing you want to do is open up your environment file. In this case, I'm going to use the development environment since that's what I'm working here on locally. What you need to do is add a couple of lines to your environment file. The first one you do is config.actionmailer.delivery method, and you set this to SMTP. Next, you're going to give it a hash of options to tell it how to configure the SMTP settings. So you do ActionMailer SMTP settings, and it's going to be a hash. And the first thing you need is enable start TLS auto. Set that to true, and that leverages Ruby 1.8.7's built-in TLS ability. Tells Rails to start using it. So if you're using a plugin and you're using earlier versions of Ruby and Rails, you can just consult the documentation for the plugin. So the settings for Gmail are the SMTP address, which is smtp.gmail.com, the port, which is 587, and then you have an authentication type, which you set as plain. Domain is the name of your domain, so you can just say myapp.com. In a real situation, this would be whatever your app is going to be. Username, this is your username at gmail.com. And your password is whatever your Gmail password is. I'll fill this out with real values later so we can take a look at how it actually works. Okay, so now that we have our development file set up, we need to create an ActionMailer model. So let's open up the terminal, and we'll use the script generate command to create a mailer. Let's call it notifier, and it's going to have one action called Gmail message. So we run that, and it should have created a model for us. And there it is. In this particular example, I'm going to not pass it anything. In a real setting, obviously, when you're sending a message, it's most likely it's sending some data that was entered via a form or something like that. But in this simple example, I just want to show you how to set up Gmail so that it's sending messages correctly. So when we call this, we're not going to be passing it any parameters. We're just going to send a canned message with static text. So use the standard ActionMailer values. So let's give it a subject. Let's call it message via Gmail. Recipients. In this example, I'm going to be sending a comment notification to myself, so I'm going to use my own email address. And the from field, generally these things would be passed in via parameters, but in this case, we're just using some default values. And sent on is the current time. So we now have our model for the mailer setup. Now we need to create the email view that it's going to use. So open up our views folder. You can see it's created notifier here. And we've got a file called gmailmessage.erb, and we're going to rename this because we want to give it a MIME type. And we're going to call it gmailmessage.text.plain.erb. So in this case, we're just going to do plain text because we're not doing anything fancy. And you see that it has this default information here already. And all we're going to do is say, hello, you are receiving this email via Gmail. Okay, so that's what the contents of the email will be when it's sent. All right, pretty easy. Next thing we need to do is create a controller so that this will actually do something. So let's bring up the terminal, and we can do this with script generate controller notifications, we'll call it, and it's going to have an index and a create action. Now the create action is just going to be in charge of actually sending the email, so there's no view associated with it. So we can get rid of the create view file. And let's set up the index action. I think all we're going to do in this case is just have a little link that triggers the create action, essentially. In production, obviously, this would be completely useless, but it's just to demonstrate the sending of email. So let's have a link that says send a message via Gmail. And all it does is send you to the notifications controller in the create action. Okay, so let's add some code to the notifications controller so these things actually do something. So index is just going to be that link. We don't need any code for that. But the create action is what's going to actually send the message. So we call it as an action on our notifier model. And the way you send a message is by saying deliver underscore and then the name of the method, which in this case is Gmail message. And this tells the ActionMailer model to send a message by using that method. So that single line is all we need, and it's going to use our settings that we set up in our development environment file. And let's set a flash message that says your message has been sent, and then we'll redirect to the root path, just so we can go back to the index page and see that the message has been sent, give a little bit of confirmation for the user, just basic stuff. All we need to do now is add a root route. By default, we're going to go to the notifications controller and the index action. Okay, and that's really all there is to it, so let's give it a try. Start up our server with script server. And go to localhost 3000. Okay, notifications. There it is. We just click the link and we should get a message saying the message has been sent. So click send. There you go, your message has been sent. So now we will see if it has arrived. And here we are, got a new message. Message via Gmail, and there's our message.